So, Woman at Point Zero by Nawal el Saadawi. Who wants to give 5 minute summary, 10 minute summary?
I think Sierra should, because she just read
What?
it.
I also think so too. So, just some background. I read it maybe like 2 years ago. When did I read it? Was it one where? Yeah, I read it maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Gabe read it before that when he was in high school, and Sierra read it last week. But it's a book that we all like. Think that there's a lot to talk about, and wanted to share how it has influenced our lives for the good or worse, and why maybe other people should read it or not. Okay, so we'll start off with a summary, then we'll go into what we like and dislike, and then we'll go into after that how it's affected us in our decision making. Okay, so Sierra, take it away.
Oh God. Okay. So the story starts off with a woman, a doctor, entering a prison and having an interest in this woman named Firdaus. Um, and I would say that some of her interest is kind of, from her inability to get to know her in the beginning. So she's kind of an unreachable figure, and that makes her a little bit more desirable to the doctor. And after a little bit of time, she's eventually able to, actually interview the woman, which only is allowed as Firdaus is going to be put to death the next day. And that's what makes her, okay with finally speaking to someone. Um, but yeah, so Firdaus goes through and tells the story of her life. It's a very tragic story. Um, yeah. um,
Cool. Anything you'd like to add, Gabe?
Um, well, it goes through her entire life
Yeah.
and how, like, the end of the book starts exactly where it began, which is at the jail right before her execution, which I really liked how the plot, like, really wrapped itself up in the end. So it's, like, a very
Mm,
satisfying book to finish, at least for me.
mm, yeah. A lot of books I read, and I'm like, damn, it's over. Like, fuck, when is this gonna finish? But I agree. Finishing the book, it felt good and bad. Good and just how uh, the literary work came to make me think, and how it impressed me with their play of words and stuff like that, um, and her imaginative self. But bad because it was over and it was a fun read. But I suppose the bad is very limited because there's more books by Nawal el Saadawi, and I can always just reread the book too. But continue. Can you tell us a little bit more about her life, exactly, from what you recall,
you asking me or you asking Gabe?
Gabe?
Okay.
So I remember the story begins with Firdaus when she's a
Mm-hmm.
child, and she has this like friend that they explore each other's bodies and things, but it was
Mm-hmm.
written very innocently. And at the time, I didn't think that much of it, but like how the terminology wasn't very sexual at all during these first couple of
Mm-hmm.
chapters, which, you know, is obviously reflective of Firdaus's age at the time and her
Yeah, her
innocence.
ignorance and
And
things.
it changes so hard, like 180 degrees, and then, you know, towards the end of the book. And I just think that's something to point out because, like, not only are the type of words being used to describe like things of a sexual nature, I think it also reflects like how she grows up and just becomes more mature over the course of the book too.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't remember much about her parents other than that her mother was kind of abusive.
Hmm.
Could someone else help me elaborate on that?
Yeah, abusive mother, and I think the father was out of the picture very quickly, death by work accident or something. And her uncle was like the main figure in the house. But it was a poor household. Like they just kind of worked hard to stay alive by making food and doing the little they can. Very, very small house. I mean, when I was reading it, I imagined the whole house like one room, kind of hut type of deal. But what did you see that early time of her life as, Sierra?
I agree. Like the hut thing, it honestly kind of like watching like a Star Wars movie was kind of the same type of vibe of how would I imagine this room. But in the beginning, she actually talks about, she remembers seeing her mom and feeling very safe around her mother, and she remembers looking in her eyes and feeling safe in her eyes, and she references it multiple times, like later on in the book, that she hasn't known that feeling of safety in somebody's eyes
Mm,
in a long time, um, because eventually her she says that the woman who was her mom, it was no longer her mother. So I don't know if it's saying that her mom changed, or if it was like another woman came into her household.
hmm. I think it was a change in the mother. I can't really say for sure because I don't remember it too well,
Mhm.
but I'm pretty sure that she stayed with her mother throughout the time until she asked to leave to go to school. But yeah, it's very
That was when
interesting
she
when
lived
people
with her
change.
uncle.
Yeah, she
Huh?
left to go live with her uncle after her parents both died, and she went to go to school.
Gotcha, yeah. So parents both died, went to live with the uncle, and then after the uncle, she left for school. Okay.
Yeah, her uncle got married and sent her away to a boarding
Hmm.
school after his wife found her letting their servant girl sleep in her bed. And Firdaus slept
Hmm.
on the floor. Or no, Firdaus slept with her in the bed, and after that, they sent her away to a boarding school.
Hmm. Gotcha. Gotcha. Her time in the boarding school is actually one of my favorite parts of the book, and I have um, a note on it because she was very alone, um, but she made friends and she would talk to them about different things. But she was different from the other people, and she felt that she didn't like to talk about the things they like to talk about, boys and fashion, etc. That stuff didn't impress her, uh, but she was still there for it. She listened in. Um, but then she found the library. She got really into books and reading, and she read a lot. Until eventually she got even bored of the books because it was the same story about men conquering things and ruining it or being obsessed with malicious ideas, etc. Like drugs and power and murder, women, etc. So eventually she went out and just kind of hung out in the playground long after hours when the lights went out and everybody was supposed to go to bed. And this part specifically really made me feel a lot of things. It was just the way she spoke. It was powerful, um, like super metaphorical. You know what I mean? I definitely was not real, like conceivable things. Um, Here, I have the page written out. I could read it honestly. Would you guys be
Read it.
down for that? Okay, hold on. Let me see if I have the PDF here. Uh, Anyways, it was very, very artistic, very imaginative, and things like that. But let me. You guys hear me? Honestly, I don't have the book on PDF. I thought I did. Here, if I tell you the line and page, will you read it, Sierra?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So it's page 19. Uh, no. There's no way it's page 19. Page 28. And it's with Iqbal on the playground. What do you see?
I don't think it's 28 either. This is where she's with her uncle still.
Yeah, it's way after that.
Yeah. What are you talking about? The part where she's like talking about the green in her eyes or something like that?
Yeah.
The teacher.
Yeah.
The teacher. Yeah, she runs into the teacher. And, she feels things like before time began and after time ends, and like it warps through like these abstract feelings. That show is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think Firdaus gets these very flowery emotions and thoughts
Mm-hmm.
when she's looking into people's eyes. Because I think she only really pays attention to people's eyes when they meet her gaze, and she Firdaus really likes them. So
Mm.
I'm not
Yeah, this is
exactly
the
sure
second
why,
time
but
we've talked about her, like importance or her infatuation with eyes.
Mm-hmm.
well, from my understanding, eyes are like the windows to the soul, as they say. So maybe she
Mm-hmm.
feels as though like she's able to bond to someone's soul or true personality, unless if she's able to meet their gaze and appreciate their eyes. Um, but maybe there's some other cultural reason or something that I don't know about why she finds eyes so important to her. But I noticed also related to the eyes that towards the end of the book, she doesn't really talk about people's eyes at often as much as the beginning. So maybe like over time, she found less and less people meeting her gaze and focusing on each other's eyes, or just didn't find them that important over time.
I honestly think the last instance of her talking about someone's eyes is similar to the situation with Miss Iqbal, the man that she fell in love with in the garden at her workplace, where she allows herself to fall in love with him and then, is betrayed by him as he ends up getting married to like the CEO's daughter or something. And after that, it seems that she takes like a very hard turn and doesn't allow herself to really feel or become involved in people so much anymore. And she kind of goes back to the mindset of prostitution being the best way for her to survive.
Yeah.
But it's very similar. Like, not to like jump too far ahead, but Danny, you said that this was your favorite part with Miss Iqbal. Mine actually is the part where she's talking to the man in the garden and then seeing how quickly she changes, because it's a very similar idea of her saying, um, something like that she asks if you're crying. She says, "Are you crying?" And then they say no. Um, and then after that, she wonders to herself and out loud, do they remember? Do they remember this happening? And people begin to think she's crazy. And in the beginning of the book, it's, her young friends in the boarding school with her that are saying, how can you not know love? Like thinking that she's crazy for that. And then after the fact, it's, how can you be in love? You're so silly for that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if she ever falls in love. Does she describe a moment in her life ever feeling love?
With that man, yeah.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, she like, oh, let me see if I can find the part.
Because I think she describes it also with the teacher Iqbal afterwards.
Yeah, and somebody asks one of her friends, what's her friend's name?
I found the page too. So there's this website. It's called archive.org, where it's like an online library, and I rented it out for free. Um, but I found the page, and it's, she's out in the playground by herself, and the teacher Iqbal says, "Who's sitting there?" In a weak, scared voice, I replied, "It's me, Firdaus." When she had drawn near, she recognized me and seemed surprised, for I was one of the best girls in her class, and the best girls used to go to bed as soon as the night bell rang. I told her I was feeling a little tense and had not been able to fall asleep, so she sat down next to me. Her name was Iqbal. She was short and plump, with long black hair and black eyes. I could see her eyes looking at me, observing me, despite the darkness. Every time I turned my head, they were after me, holding on to me, refusing to let me go. Even when I covered my face with both hands, they seemed to see through them into my eyes. Without warning, I burst into tears. The tears ran down my face behind my hands. She took hold of both my hands and lifted them away from my face. I heard her say, "Firdaus, Firdaus, please don't cry." "Let me cry," I said. "I've never seen you cry before. What's happened to you?" "Nothing at all, nothing." "Impossible. Something must have happened." "No, nothing has happened, Miss Iqbal." There was a note of surprise in her voice. "Are you crying for no reason at all?" "I don't know. No, I do not know what the reason is. Nothing new has happened to me." She remained by my side, seated in silence. I could see her black eyes wandering into the night and the tears swelling up in them with glistening light. She tightened her lips and swallowed hard, and suddenly the lights in her eyes went out. Again and again they started to shine, and after a moment went out, like flames snuffed out in the night. But the moment came when she tightened her lips and swallowed hard, but in vain, for 2 years stayed behind in her eyes. I saw them drop onto her nose and slowly trickle down each side. She hid her face with one hand, pulled out a handkerchief with the other, and dabbed her nose. "Are you crying, Miss Iqbal?" I asked. "No," she said, and then hid in her handkerchief, swallowed hard, and smiled at me. The night around us was deep, silent, motionless, with not a single sound or movement anywhere. Everything was steeped in an absolute darkness through which no ray of light penetrated, for in the sky was neither moon nor sun. My face was turned towards her, and my eyes looked into her eyes, two rings of pure white, surrounding two circles of intense black that looked out at me. As I continued to gaze into them, the white seemed to turn even whiter, and the black even blacker, as though light flowed through them from some unknown magical source which was neither on the earth nor in the heavens, for the earth was enveloped in the cloak of night, and the heavens had no sun nor moon to give them light. I held her eyes in mine, took her hand in mine. The feeling of our hands touching was strange, sudden. It was a feeling that made my body tremble with a deep, distant pleasure, more distant than the age of my remembered life, deeper than the consciousness I had carried with me throughout. I could feel it somewhere, like a part of my being which had been born with me when I was born, but had not grown with me when I had grown. Like a part of my heart that I had once known, but left behind when I was born. A cloudy awareness of something that could have been, and yet was never lived. At that moment a memory came to mind. My lips opened to speak, but my voice failed to come through, as though no sooner did I remember than I had already forgotten. My heart faltered, stifled by a frightened, frenzied beating over something precious I was on the point of losing, or had just lost, forever. My fingers held on to her hand with such violence that no force on earth, no matter how great, could tear it away from me. Yeah, that was the most memorable. Like, when I read that shit, I was like, wow, poetic.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like a pretty romantic scene, and considering how
Mhm.
young she is, she probably interprets it that way.
Yeah.
Because eye contact's a very powerful, underrated form of intimacy, in my opinion, and I
Hmm.
think Firdaus would agree.
Hmm.
I would also
Yeah.
agree.
I was listening to someone actually. I don't remember where exactly or what his name was, but he was defining sexual tension as like prolonged eye contact without words. You know, and it'd be real.
No, I definitely agree.
Cool. So yeah, she's a kid. She gets older, becomes a prostitute. Um, what about her times then can we learn from? So from her childhood, we learn to uh, be open about the way people look at us and understand, um, you know, trying to find things that are important to us and be in touch with feelings and things. What else would you say we learned from our childhood? Nothing? Cool. So, adulthood, or yeah, let's just kind of get to it in the prostitution things. What got her into it? Where did she start?
It was after she ran away from a man. So I think she ran away from home after returning from the boarding school,
Mm-hmm.
and or no, she got married. That's what it was. She was married off to
It was the Scar Man.
yeah,
The
the man
Scar
with the
Man.
ugly thing on his face.
Oh yeah, the ugly dude. And that was just like a super traditional, like 1800 type of marriage. You know, the guy didn't do shit, was a bumfuck, and the woman uh, cleaned and stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure this book is during like, mid 1900s Egypt.
Hmm. Yeah, it was
So,
1950s, I believe,
like,
Hmm.
when she
one
was an
thing
adult.
that, yeah, one thing that I've personally not really ever had the chance to like wrap my head around is just the fact that like their cultural definition of, a family and a marriage is
It's so
so much
different.
more different than our understanding that like we read these things about how he was treating her and how bizarre it sounds. Like not even a laborer would be like a maid would be treated as rough as Firdaus was in this household. Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, because she was
if
beat. She was just used for
if
vagina.
it's in your culture to treat women as an object, like someone else might read this book and say like, oh, that's
Oh yeah.
completely normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but that's not the point. The point is it's about Firdaus herself, not
Hmm.
just about the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, just culture throughout the world. I mean, as time goes forward and globalization, just festers and grows, uh, we're kind of like joining into this singular culture, but still, we haven't gotten to like a very deep point. There's lots of varying cultures throughout the world and how people treat each other, their roles in the household, and the things they do for fun. And just curious to see the different extremes. One being like uh, the man abusing the woman, and if there are any cultures with the woman abusing the man, and like how is that played out?
I think it's interesting because even though it is very much the culture of like where they are in the setting
Hmm.
of the book, like she's still able to recognize the fact that that's not right. Everything that's happening to her is
Hmm.
wrong, even if this is what has been deemed normal by society. Like I think there's even a
Hmm.
part in the book where she makes a comment to her uncle's new wife about being beat by her husband.
Hmm.
And she says, everyone's beat by their husband. Like,
Yeah,
that's just
it's just
what
how we
happened.
do it here.
Yeah. But she still is able to recognize that that's not what she wants for herself. And even
Hmm.
later on, there's the woman prostitute that she meets that gets her involved in everything. And she also, kind of like becomes an icon, I think, in a way for Firdaus, because she is not willing to accept that culture.
Hmm.
But she knows that that's not what she wants for herself.
Mhm. That brings to question: is there a universal right? You know, like, are there innate human rights? Yeah. So.
I think
Ooh,
the what was that?
no, the tongue click. I was like, oh snap, he's gonna pop off.
Um, yeah. So I think that every human's innate rights are those equivalent to every other animal out there. So considering we are just fundamentally
Mhm.
animals, and culture is like a man-made thing that we've created.
Mhm.
Like if we took that away, like the only thing that we are entitled to are things that we can just get naturally,
Mhm.
like being born,
Mhm.
or the air we breathe
Breathing. Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, soon, even breathing clean air isn't gonna be a fucking human right. Like, most people are gonna have dirty air. You know what I mean? And like, uh, who knows about water? Water might not even be a fucking human right anymore.
a lot of
I,
the rights that people have, invented and earned were, obviously made to improve everybody's quality of life,
Mhm.
you know, and women have to fight for those rights a lot more than men do
Mhm.
because of, you know,
Patriarchy.
patriarchy, physical differences, and things of the such. But like in our own country in the 1930s, I believe, women, had to fight for their right not to be property, and like
Yeah, suffrage and
that's
shit.
just that's just the kind of thing that hasn't really happened yet, I guess, in some other places.
Mm. What are your thoughts, Sierra? Natural human rights. What are they? How do they come to being? Where do they come from?
I think that our perception of what rights are comes from, like the Bible a lot in our culture, just because that's what our country was established on.
Mm.
Um, but, you know, I agree with the that I'm sorry, I'm like all over the place right now.
No,
Uh,
no, take your time.
I agree that our basic rights are those that are similar to that of man. But I also think that, kind of like how you were saying, it's not necessarily, I don't want to use the word fair, because nothing is fair really, but because of the way our country was established, I mean, I'm just obviously speaking about what I know right now.
Hmm.
Um,
That's all we can do, right?
right. um, with being established on biblical ideals, like that kind of set the foundation for women being viewed as less than,
Hmm.
um, and kind of making it so not everyone was deemed to have the same rights
Hmm.
from like the very beginning. But about what I think like we're born with, I think that we all should have the right to the things that we need to survive, and then going further off of that, the things to actually live. So obviously clean water,
Hmm.
access to food, access to oxygen, clean oxygen. But to survive, you know,
Hmm.
I think that gets more into the nitty gritty of kind of like what this book talks about with equality and all that.
Hmm. So we have our cultural rights, based off of the founding of the country. Um, so other countries might have their own cultural rights that are different. Let's say they do the like Hindu texts. They built their country off of that kind of stuff. Their rights are different in that way. Um, is what you're saying, or it's like
I'm not sure if Egypt is Hindu.
No, I'm not. I'm not referring to Egypt. Egypt was
Oh,
Muslim, or was and is Muslim. Um, but yeah, just like that. Uh, but then followed up with rights being what we need to survive. So
I guess I should flip it. Surviving would be basic things like water, things like that. To actually live would be, you know,
mhm.
things that make our life worth living.
Okay, yeah, because you have Maslow's hierarchy needs. If we just want to like take a simple format, we could go into a whole hour discussion of what do we need. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you, not much, as both of you know by the smirks on your face I see. But um, to Maslow, you have lots of things that we need. You know what I mean? Like, sure, we need food, water, shelter to survive, but like that's not it. We need love, we need appreciation, we need respect, we need self-actualization.
Mhm.
Um, and if you look at those things, we as people in our culture don't get most of it. You know what I mean? At least American culture. I could tell you more than 50% of that is absent in our population. Um,
hmm. Well, I think is that the hierarchy, like the pyramid shaped hierarchy that I've
uh-huh.
seen images of,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think its shape is transformed in like our
Mm-hmm.
modern times. So we were talking about how like our basic human rights are like our necessities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think nowadays instead of being like a pyramid shaped hierarchy, it's more like a rectangular shaped hierarchy.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is like since basic things like food and water are more available to us modern people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also people in third world countries too, they have technology and things of the such that help them get those basic needs. But so the reason why it's a rectangle is because the top needs I think are like increasing, per individual. So what I mean by that is that in the original
Mm-hmm.
pyramid, I think the shape indicates that the quantity of each need is like scalar. So at the top,
Uh-huh.
that's like self fulfillment and things like that, and love and very
Uh-huh.
abstract, intangible things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the hierarchy indicates that those are like
Less
less
valuable.
less valuable or less attainable for
Mm-hmm.
most people. But I don't think that's really true nowadays. I think that a lot of people equally value their need for strength and independence and love as much
Mm-hmm.
as their necessities like food and water.
That's funny because you're describing it as such, and that's how I kind of lay it out in my mind as well. Like when I said Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I saw all of them as equal value. Like not only do we need food and water, but we need these other things just as much. You know what I mean? Um, and I totally agree. Like that's it's important shit. You know what I mean? Um,
I think that's why Firdaus values her her liberty equally as much as her own
mm,
life and things like that because she needs it's one of her necessities.
mm, yeah. Uh, Actually, her conclusions on those types of ideas has become a very strong philosophy that I hold in my life. And it's the phrase I've said to both of you guys. But I want nothing. I hope for nothing. I fear nothing. Therefore, I am free. And just how she's able to create those conclusions from her life experiences is awesome. You know what I mean? It's like equivalent to the fucking Buddha. You know what I mean? Like literally without ever reading Buddhism or what that type of stuff. Like she did what the Buddha did. You know what I mean? Um, and came to the same kind of ideas and conclusions. But taking a step back, I would like to share my idea of natural human rights before we continue. I think it's a construct. You know, I don't think they uh, physically exist or anything like that. It's equivalent to like time. You know, like we have clocks and stuff, and we have food, and we have water, and we have equality. You know, like care for others, but defining it as a right is a privilege. And as we develop and grow as a society, like we should be focused on increasing the rights that we can give to our people. Like that should be a pretty good, decent, fair goal any society has. You know, the more rights I can give my people, the better I am as a society, or the better I am as a country, or planet, whatever. Um, so, for example, old cavemans and things like that, you didn't have the right to fucking nothing. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't have the right to wake up the next morning. You didn't have the right to find food. You didn't have the right to clean water. You didn't have the right to uh, you didn't touch your own dick. Like, you know what I mean? You had no rights. You know what I mean? Like, you just hoped that shit worked out. And then people got together and they're like, you know what? You have the right to have my corn. You know, I'm gonna always make corn, and you have the right to it. As long as you have the right to like kill, I don't know, fucking rabbits that try and eat my corn. And yeah, you agree upon things, and then society grows to the complicated stature that it is. And yeah, some people are fucking saying now Wi-Fi is a human right. You know what I mean? Um, and like if you look at it, having Wi-Fi and not having Wi-Fi, or like internet access, let me just put in that aspect. Having internet access and not having internet access in today's society is like the difference between uh, like being homeless and not, or like essentially being able to contribute to society. Like I don't know how even like the most obscure farmers, they, what's it called? Like they sell their produce online or they email people and shit. You know what I mean? So it's odd, right? Wi-Fi is the human right, but here we are considering
I
it.
think,
You know what I mean?
like Gabe was
I'd
saying,
argue
it kind
for
of
it.
just evolves as time goes on and our society grows. You know, what we need to survive kind of changes with us.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's almost a necessity. You know what I mean? Like if I want to have a job, or like if I want to make my own business, or if I want to do physical therapy, and I didn't have internet, and I had no access to internet, could I do it? Like with that? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but that's why we have public libraries with internet and computers and shit like that, because uh, people recognize it, I think. Anyways,
It's possible using free internet from the library, but not using any internet is
yeah,
impossible.
yeah. I would agree that it is very, very, very difficult, but not impossible. I can create an imaginary scenario of someone making bracelets and just selling it on the side of the street, you know, like making enough money, or just, you know,
Or
churning.
reading every physical therapy book under the sun, like Good Will
Mhm.
Hunting.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Just doing that paper shit, going through paper books. Um, and honestly, like that alone is powerful, but finding which book is best is pretty hard without like online reviews. You know what I mean? Like, oh, which one do most physical therapists suggest? And you have to go to all the clinics. What did you guys read? Which one should I read? It's still possible, but it's just hard. Like it's just so hard. To do something that would take 5 minutes takes days. anyways, increasing rights. That's what I see. It's a construct, but the more the better, right? Especially for all genders and animals. The animals definitely don't get enough rights. I, like I look at roadkill and I'm just flabbergasted. You know what I mean? Like dozens, hundreds of people drive by this dead raccoon on the side of the road and don't even think anything. Like they won't even turn the steering wheel to like respect its dead body. But if it was like a dead human, bro, the road would be closed. No one could drive past the road. Like it's such a huge difference in rights. You know what I mean? Um, it's stupid.
I don't think people really give much mind to critters like that, and I
Mm.
think that's like the ultimate unachievable goal of rights and what we've been talking about is like
Mhm.
how do we define who gets them? Because
Yeah,
people
you only have so many
people
resources.
assign people assign you know fundamental value on like a spectrum based off of
Hmm.
usefulness, like you said. I guess like animals aren't very smart, they're not very useful, so they're low on the spectrum and they'll get a lot of respect from us.
Hmm.
And I think that some societies think that way about people too. Like I think our
Hmm.
society thinks that way about like poor people, and other societies might think that way about older people or women or children.
Hmm.
So they get
Yeah,
an unequal share of rights.
that's a huge point. Um, because there's the people who govern the society, who manage like resources and shit, and kind of create the status quo of rights. And it would be a lot of resources to try and protect raccoons from getting hit by cars. Like they would have to create different fences and things. I don't know what they'd have to do. That sounds like a very difficult task. Um, but yeah, I just wish we would like allocate some of those human ones, like give it to some of the animal ones. That would be pretty dope. It doesn't have to be equal. You know what I mean? Uh, Also, another thing coming to mind that when you were saying that is people will always give rights to things that are like them. So, if you are um, like an Asian woman, you're probably going to give more rights to like Asian people or women, gender, and things like that. As humans, we're always going to give more rights to humans as opposed to like other animals. It's a farther step from who we identify with. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, since it's been rulers of society of specific ways, they're the ones, those types of people, have gotten the rights.
So coming back to Woman at Point Zero,
Yeah.
judging from all this, it really sounds like a lot of Firdausa's trauma from her whole life with men seems to originate from the fact that she just lived in a very patriarchal society.
Yeah. I wonder what she would have been like in different societies, you know what I mean? Because the way she thinks, it doesn't seem like it would ever grow from uh, like just her unique experiences, but it must have, like how can we think other than what we experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that. Like, I think that, even in a different society where it wasn't necessarily as patriarchal, um,
Uh,
like with her
she would
experiences,
think similarly.
yeah, with the experiences that she had, I definitely think that there would be a lot of similarity in the way she thinks, maybe not to
Mm-hmm.
such extremes. But she had a hard fucking life, Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of wrong done to her by
Mm-hmm.
particularly men. that, gave her, I think, like a distrust and a distaste for people who are men. I mean, obviously, like, there's parts in the book where she tries to get away from that idea, like when she falls in love with that man, and like a little bit before that, she meets a man named Naomi, who she thinks is going to be kind to her, and he lets her stay with her or whatever. And even then, she's betrayed by him, and kind of keeps the flow going of what she had always believed to be true about men.
Yeah. I was also thinking just about her, like very metaphorical trains of thoughts. Like she's always very free flowy with things. Like if that was also resultant of her experience and trauma, and not necessarily just her hate for men. Because of course, if she was in another society and she was like ridiculed, let me not say of course, because this is all very ambiguous types of thought here. But let's say she was a native person in the Amazon rainforest, and they're like woodland choppers, like people who are just loggers, you know what I mean? And she has similar experiences that she had here in that Egyptian culture, but it's against loggers, like it was the loggers that kind of fucked her up and kind of stole her food, maybe raped her, whatever, got her into maybe logging, and then she was like, oh, what the hell am I doing? And goes into realize that she's better than that and does something else. Like she could have a whole different feeling of that against loggers, but what about that transcendent type of thought? Like time and space didn't seem the same to her. Time, like she just seemed like time was different. You know what I mean? It's hard to describe with words because it took a whole book to like kind of create this idea in my mind. And plus, the way I interpret it is probably different than the way a lot of people interpret it. But yeah, is that possible, or is that just an artifact of the author? You know what I mean? Like maybe I'm digging into something that is not Firdaus whatsoever, but it's just Nawal. You know what I mean? And her experiences that are completely different from Firdaus's, and that's just the way that she filled in Firdaus's mouth. You know, um, which seems the most accurate. But yeah.
Gabe, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I can't hear you, bro.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So what I was saying is that I think when it comes to Firdaus's very flowery and metaphorical thoughts about her life experiences and how they changed throughout her life, I think it's most likely a reflection of her self-confidence and independence. So
Can
it's
you say that one more time? I couldn't hear you.
I think that Firdaus's use of flowery metaphors is a reflection of her independence and power, such that she's not following the status quo. Like,
Gotcha.
society expects that it's each individual's kind of subconscious doing to just fall in line with the status quo, and maybe that's how she must have felt. She had to get married. But before and after that, when she's experiencing things that are new and refreshing and interesting to her, she uses that flowery
type of speech
exactly for, at least I think, showing that she is like thinking outside the box about herself and how she
Hmm.
perceives life in a much more like raw and personal manner rather than just looking at things very coldly and objectively.
Hmm.
So I think Firdaus was only truly herself in those moments.
Gotcha. Cool. Good perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Nice perspective.
And it's something that like we could think about in our own lives too. Like if I'm
When
feeling
we are truly ourselves.
if I'm
Sorry
feeling
to interrupt.
emotionally hurt or numb by something, I'll go very quiet mode. But when I'm feeling good, um, my face lights up. And everybody might be able to relate to that to some aspect. It's just throughout Firdaus's life, there's so many traumas. It was just on a much more extreme scale when it came to that kind of thing.
Mm. Cool. Very cool. Do you guys have any favorite lines from the book that you want to share? Like,
I'll have to think about it.
I got one highlighted here. So it's at the end. It's like the very end of the book. She's walking, and that prince dude is like, "Hey, honey, what's up?" And she's like, "Don't fuck with me." And he's like, "Oh, why? I'm looking for like a prostitute or something." She's like, "I'm too expensive for you." And he's like, "I'm a prince. I have all the money. Like, there's no way I'll give you this much money." She's like, "No, this much money. No, this much money." Well, all right. So she goes to the room with him to do the prostitution thing, and he I don't remember the conversation exactly in there, but she was pretty mad. I think he was expecting too much from her, and she's just getting mad and wants to leave. And he's like, "Oh, you're not a prostitute. You're a princess. Blah blah blah." And I um I would only know that because I'm a prince. Blah blah. Blah. And she's like, "You're not a prince. You're just a piece of shit like every other guy." Uh, and he's like, "What? You can't talk to me like that." She's like, "Don't fucking tell me what to do." And she like grabs him, kind of manhandles him, and just like, or holds a knife to him, I think it was. And the guy says, "You won't kill me. You're just a woman. You couldn't hurt a mosquito." And this is the line: "I might not kill a mosquito, but I can kill a man." And it fucking kills him. Shit was gangster. Like it was awesome. I really like that line. See, I try not to even kill bugs, like spiders, uh, even flies. Like last night, I caught the fly, kept it alive, and like put it outside. You know what I mean? But sometimes I'd be killing flies, uh, and yeah, like there are some things that just don't fucking matter. You know what I mean? Like someone, someone's like really a dick. I feel like I would be able to kill them no problem, and not even think twice about it. You know? But I hold some guilt in killing bugs.
I think Fidel's life experiences uh, forged her personality to
Mm,
just hopefully believe that men are less than insects just because of their tendency to abuse and hurt them.
hmm. Yeah,
And I think
for
she's
sure,
justified for that. She should treat them like insects.
for sure. Cool. Any final remarks that you guys have? What did we learn from her as an adult? So we talked about what we learned from her as a child.
Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself.
What was that? Since your headphones died, you've been hard to hear.
Oh, sorry.
It's
I
okay.
said, don't be afraid to take a chance and stand up for yourself. Because
Straight
you
up.
either fail or you lose. But sometimes if you fail, wait, you could fail or you could win.
You can fail, you can lose.
You could fail or you could win, but sometimes even if you do fail, you win. Because
Yeah.
when Firdaus ended up in jail at the end, she felt like a win, and she looked like a win.
Yeah, 100%.
Like she didn't kill someone, but she set out her goal to like make her own choice and steer her own life into her own direction, even if it ended her up in jail. But
Hmm.
it was worth it to her.
It was all worth it in the end. Yeah, I like to build on that. Just when you have the chance, like recognize when you're feeling those ways that are flowery, if you will. You know, like as we describe her writing. To know who you are and to be able to kind of capitalize on those things. Um, you know, it's very important to know what's important to you. Well, if you don't have anything that's important to you, uh, life is kind of boring. You know, like you just kind of do it and it's done, and then that's it. You know what I mean? But if you have things that are important, it makes it more fun. Kind of like whoa, like anxious. It makes it um, more interesting, and yeah,
Hmm.
how we define what's important are those flowery moments, those giddy feelings that we get that break the boundaries of what is really like time and space, or what the status quo is, at least in our society. What about you? What did you learn, Sierra?
I want to say that there's a power in the way that we choose to allow life to affect us. You know, doesn't mean that I'm going to go and kill somebody for wronging me or having been wronged by an amount of people who just so happen to be the same gender. But I think that Firdaus did a beautiful job at taking her life experiences and allowing herself to grow from them rather than to fall apart from them.
Mm.
Even though, you know, some in the book may view her as having had fallen apart from the experiences that she had, but like, you know, you guys were saying, she really came into power in the end with what she had done. And, you
Yeah,
know,
she grew from it. Like
yeah.
all those things developed her into one of the most powerful like protagonists I fucking read about. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like the only one that comes to mind quickly that was more powerful than her is like Goku, and that's it. But yeah, that's dope. I was thinking also now. I wrote a comment in the back of the book, just like my concluding thoughts, and I had forgotten I'd written them. But then Sierra, she messaged me, like responding to them essentially. And what I was thinking, it led to like a super long conversation we had, going on to different things that day. Uh, After a while, because various reasons, whatever. But I thought that in today's society, or at least the society that I grew up in, um, things are still kind of similar. However, the idea of what is a man and what is a woman has blurred, so that like people might treat people of the same gender in similar ways, or it could go the other way around. Like women treating like a man the way a man like used to treat a woman and things like that. Maybe not physically, but verbally, or maybe also physically. You know what I mean? It's just a lot more blur, and also what is deemed like trauma has also grown. Before is like beating you up and like raping you. That's kind of like it. But because we have so many intricacies to our society, and like we have all these technologies and these ways of communicating and these ways of like feeling things from each other, or like sharing and expressing our thoughts. Like we traumatize people, differently with words and actions, because you go to jail for beating someone up or raping them pretty quickly.
In theory.
Well, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, in theory, as long as someone says something about it, if you just let them beat you up, and not just let them, but like if you're afraid to speak up and stuff like that, and the consequences that revolves around, and then they won't. But it seems like there's good power in the judicial system for what's it called?
For the battery part, yeah, I wouldn't agree for the rape part, though.
I had lots of friends. Okay, maybe not lots of friends, but a couple of friends, and heard lots of stories of people getting kicked out of school and things like that for rape, but they said that they weren't even like with the person. It was just because like varying things, like the word of the rapee is stronger than the rapist, at least in the school setting. Stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, as long as someone says it, it's just like as good as word. But that's who's to say? I never had anybody accuse me of raping them.
I think that's just
I've never
a
accused
really,
anybody of raping me either. What were you saying, Gabe?
I think that's just a really conscious move on like Westerners' part to really avoid being around people or having a society that is like feared asses. Like, these kinds of things that have happened to her were circumstantially, even in her society, really, really fucked up, like comparatively to women that she probably knew. And like, it obviously would never fly if people knew them here. Like, here in our country. But like, she, despite all this, she had the power to like do something about it herself.
What was that noise? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's easy to accuse someone of rape and like them get in trouble for it because there's no markers, you know what I mean? Like if you get beat up, it's obvious, like you have scars and things like that, but if you get raped, there's nothing, so you just kind of have to trust the accuser, you know what I mean?
I think that, yeah, a lot of times that is how it happens, but I still think that the opposite is also true.
That people will say that they got raped and nobody believes them?
Right, because there's no markers, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe in the past, maybe now too, I don't know. Do you know people who've been raped and like try to tell people and they didn't?
Yeah.
They went to like the police and things, and the police was like, sorry.
Yeah, I know a couple of people. But like there's no like standard, right? Like there's never going to be like a set precedent where everything is reacted to the same way by everyone. So obviously sometimes actions taken immediately, somebody gets kicked out of school, whatever, and then on other ends of the spectrum, there's people who are, not helped at all, and nobody really gives a shit.
Yeah.
But America, but also just the world, right? Like, clearly, this isn't just like a Western issue. It's literally all over the place.
Yeah. Pretty human issue.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like one of the longest arching issues in human history.
I think it's really just gotta be like a whole entire societal change for impulsive men to stop like viewing women as objects like that. Like in every every single human, like every person. I think pretty much every society has like still this ingrained idea that like the man is responsible for pursuing the woman and also sex. Like I don't know. Like I think most religions and schools and marriage traditions and things are just gonna have to completely change like how how men and women are considered in society before like the 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 common crime of rape, you know, becomes more taboo and like intolerant and not like something that's brushed off like it's nothing. And to make a long story short, I think it should just be taken more seriously. Like it should be cracked down.
Crack down.
Even if like, there is some doubt with the accusation, like it's doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah, obviously it's a really shitty thing, when people's lives are ruined over false accusations. But that shouldn't take away from people being brave enough to come forward and say their experiences.
What could be a solution or balance for that, like between false accusations and people getting justice for being harmed?
It's a great question. I think it's a question that, can't really be answered. I mean, it's kind of like what Gabe said, it's a societal shift in the way that people view each other.
The only realistic way I could think of is like a lie detector test.
Yeah, right?
Okay, improve lie detecting tests. Cool. I wonder how often they're utilized.
In those cases?
Like, what's the cost of running a... What was that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, in cases of rape, but...
Yeah, in cases of rape. Like, how often is a lie detector test utilized? How accurate are lie detector tests, and how much does it cost to run a lie detector test? I feel like if you have one, it's free after that. You just buy it, and then you can use it all you want, right? But I don't know. Something to look into. Lie detector test seems like a great idea, though. I heard they're pretty accurate. I feel like I was reading somewhere and they're like super accurate. But kind of hard to believe. I feel like I could fake a lie detector
slow your
test.
pulse down or something.
Yeah, but then again, I don't know. I've never had a lie detector test done on me.
I saw in a movie the way to fake a lie detector test is to put like a thumbtack
in the shoe. Yeah, I remember that.
What movie is that? Do you remember? That sounds very familiar, but I don't know why.
Ocean's 12?
No, never seen it.
It's a good movie. I don't know if it was from that movie specifically, but yeah, I remember watching it. You were talking about it. You just step on it and then your heart gets... Cool. So Yeah. I suppose the best way is just respect, like men respect women not to rape them, and women respect men not to like accuse them of rape if they've not raped. You know, um, that's why it's just important to respect others. How fast life, right? Even if you don't think they deserve respect, at least give them the respect to ignore them, and not acknowledge their existence.
Yep.
Cool.
What if like certain circumstances make you feel justified to not provide that kind of respect to someone else? Like in Firdausi's situation, like, do you think she was justified not to respect men for what they did to her?
Um, I think that the ideal solution or philosophy would be to not hate men or hate anything. I don't like hate in any way, no matter what. Um, to understand, like, that's kind of the way they grew up. It fucking sucks. But let them know, like, hey, if you're gonna fuck with me, I'm gonna kill you. You know what I mean? And like, feel no shame in doing back what they've done to her. Or, like, feel no shame in um, doing what she thinks is right. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully that's maybe what she was thinking at the end. Although she did state explicitly, I'm pretty sure, like, hate to some degrees.
So more
But
indifference to that which wrongs you.
yeah, like, of course it's gonna suck immediately because that's just how our emotional body happens. But to be able to get over things, to forgive, is extremely powerful. No matter what the fuck happens, and decide on what the best decision is to do and act on it. You know what I mean? Um, without hate, without regret, without spite, just with compassion. Every action with compassion and respect, even if it's aggressive.
I don't know if I can completely get behind like the forgiveness for all things,
Mm-hmm.
but I can agree with the indifference part. Like I don't think that we have to forgive people, but I think that if we can acknowledge what an experience did for our lives and how it allowed us to grow as an individual,
Mm-hmm.
and be indifferent towards the individual themselves. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's effective. I don't think we have to forgive people for awful things.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like the case of Rodos, I don't think she had to forgive her father for the way that she was treated as a child, but rather just understand why it was the way it was.
Hmm. I don't. I don't know if these terrible people who do these wrongdoings to women everywhere. I don't know if forgiveness is the right answer because like personally, I think people will not change unless if they're made aware of the issues and punished for it. So I think people won't like feel the need to improve themselves if they're always forgiven for everything, and they won't feel responsible for the bad things that they do. They might not view them as bad, but if someone else punishes them for it or makes it aware that it is, then they could learn from someone else's experiences and apply that to themselves. If that doesn't happen to them, they're never going to have a need to change.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I wouldn't be who I am without, being hated or criticized by others.
Cool. Yeah, I still see the value in forgiveness in all things because uh, one, like, you can only forgive if someone does something wrong. Like, if you're saying that you shouldn't forgive people who do wrong things because they won't learn from it, then the idea of forgiveness couldn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, something wrong has to happen for forgiveness to even exist. Uh, but just because you forgive them doesn't mean you treat them the same in the future. Like, you forgive them, but now I don't have your trust. You know what I mean? Like, I forgive you, but I do not trust you to be alone with me. I do not trust you to be on time to this event. I do not trust you to uphold your promises. I do not trust you for this. You know what I mean? Like, when you forgive someone, you're giving them back like your trust in a certain aspect in your life. You know what I mean? Like, that's a huge punishment. You know what I mean? Like, to lose the trust of someone uh, who has, anything of value. You know what I mean? Uh, for example, like, I consider both of you two valuable and things like that. If I were to lose your trust in a certain aspect of our friendship, that would be a serious loss to me. You know what I mean? And I can imagine that if I did something and you guys forgave me for it, but you no longer trust me for that thing, like, I would be losing. I'd be experiencing punishment from something that could have been a lot more helpful for me in the future.
What if?
I think only.
Go
What were you gonna
ahead.
say? Okay. I was just gonna say, I think only when it's valued, like if trust is valued, then I think that can make a difference. But I think in some cases it's not valued, and in those cases, that's when like punishment, as Gabe was saying, is
Mm-hmm.
the way to learn.
I have a similar idea to Sierra. I was gonna say, what if it's a stranger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why like, you do what you think is right. You know what I mean? Like, if a stranger punched me in the face out of nowhere, like, I'm gonna fight him. You know what I mean? And, like, we'll see what happens. Like, it's not hating him. I'm not whatever. And, like, once I think about the situation and I try and understand what's going on, I'm gonna forgive him uh, for punching me. You know what I mean? At first, I'm mad because that emotional response to the experience. But I'll look at him, or either bloody below me or standing above me, um, depending on how the fight goes, and think like, uh, we'll think, okay, like, what's next? I understand, what happened now. Um, how do I want to go about this? You know what I mean? Like, make sure it doesn't happen again. You know, if it's with going through some intervention, I don't want to say punishment, but, like, probably viewed as punishment to him, an intervention to make him not just punch random people in the face, but also recognize when people like that are around me, so that I can be more aware of when someone's going to punch me in the face. Because I lost not just trust in him, but maybe that area, or maybe people that look like him. And it goes into, maybe like some ideas of discrimination and things like that. But, whatever reminded me of that moment of getting punched is what I'll be more cautious of, and what I have lost trust in. Before, I just saw uh, some dude, like, wearing Vans, and I was like, okay, whatever. And he punched me, and I'm like, oh, damn. the band's connected to him punching me, or no? Like, I don't know. Think about why he punched me, and then use those reasons to help prevent myself from getting punched again in the future, without having to exert so much energy of constantly being cautious and anxious and things like that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my idea, and how I try to make decisions in my life. But, yep. Cool. Well, anything else before we hang out?
Thanks for letting me borrow this book.
Yeah, no problem. Gabe.
I wish I would have read it the first time that I was supposed to read it. But
Even back in school?
yeah. Did you read it in Miss Langley's class? Yeah. I wish I would have read it then, but I don't think it would have had. I don't think I would have appreciated it as much as I did reading it now.
Yeah, it's definitely more intriguing as an adult, since like it's just more relatable. Like being on your own, or like knowing people who've been sexually assaulted, like it definitely hits harder than from being a kid.
Yeah. I think it's something that you should read at different points in your life to have, different responses to it.
Yeah, each read will probably make you feel something different at some point.
Yep.
Maybe when you return it, I'll reread it too.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hope anybody interested in the book finds the time to read it. It was very good. But that's it for tonight. Gotta get to bed. I'm gonna do some stuff on Monday. But yeah. Peace out, y'all.